So, welcome everybody to our St Bart's Hospital project, St Bartholomew's Hospital in Rochester. I don't know why I turned into Dracula then. Hello from me, Natasha, and
hello from me. I'm George Atzev from Future Chatham. We're kickstarting our week-long program looking at the history of St Bartholomew's as well as its future now that it's in this exciting phase of redevelopment. So it's the historic heart of health in Medway for over 900 years, which is a long while. And over the course of this week, myself and Natasha will be digitally sharing historical information about the hospital, which is one of the key landmarks in the Medway area to many local residents. And as well as that, whilst we share that information, we want to hear from you. We want to hear, have you stayed, worked, or lived in the hospital, or know someone that has? And please do share your stories, experiences, memories, anything that is of interest to us. And that information that you provide with us, hopefully we'll be able to give over to the archive so that generations ahead will know what the hospital was about, because obviously it's turning into apartments and it'll be great to preserve its history going forward.
yeah, we're really hoping to collect some interesting stories and make sure that nothing is lost essentially. And health is obviously of topic at the moment with the pandemic and has been for some time. And it worked out. We didn't actually plan it that it'd fall in line with the redevelopment, so it actually worked out really well for our project.
Great time.
Yeah, because people are like, what's happening? And most people are like, oh, it's been knocked down, that's so sad. And unfortunately it's not being knocked down. It's going to be some really, really nice apartments. And so yeah, have a really good time for us to reveal some of the history and collect those stories.
Absolutely. So our project is a micro commission as part of the High Street Heritage Action Zone. It's quite a mouthful, but
that's why is it HSHAZ, isn't it?
Yeah, HSHAZ. part of its cultural programme, which is being led by Medway Council and is funded by Historic England, National Lottery Heritage Fund, and is being supported by Arts Council England. So the project itself is covering the area between Star Hill in Rochester over to Sun Pier in Chatham, including part of St Bart's. And basically for the next 3 years ahead, the program's looking at improving the area, making it more attractive for local residents, visitors, and overall, yeah, breathing some new life into the Intra area, or if you know it as the old High Street area, then that be as well. So
yeah, some incredible history along that stretch, isn't there, in general, with loads of theatres. We've lost a lot of buildings, and this is why, you know, St Bart's is one of the buildings which does still exist that didn't get knocked down. When you think we've been talking about Chatham Library on New Road, it was only there for about 80 years, built in the Victorian times and knocked down but in the 80s. So it's really good that we have that that building has survived. Obviously not the medieval one, but we'll go on to that.
Right, so I guess we'll get started with the history of St Bart's and pretty much how it all started.
I'll make sure it's not so loud. There we go. That's our little intro.
So from some material that we've been able to collate with the help of the Medway Archive Centre and the Guildhall, we came across a piece in a book from Dr. Thomas Stratton, and he did a piece on the Chatham Leper Hospital. And basically the St Bart's Hospital, as we know it, well, the original one, was founded in 1078, and that was originally for the lepers, those receiving care and suffering from the leprosy disease at the time. And it was founded by Gundulph, who was the Bishop of Rochester. So the head of the hospital, because there was a corporation at the highest level, the hospital itself had a head who was called the prior. And in terms of funding, the hospital received a very small amount. It was quite a charitable structure as an institution, and it received aid from the priory or a covenant from St. Andrew. Natasha, is there anything of relevance there about St. Andrew and how it's linked to the hospital?
Yes, so the Priory of St Andrew is what we now know as Rochester Cathedral, and it was called the Priory of St Andrew between 604 and 1542. So for quite a lot of its history, that's what it was called. So when people are looking in history and they see the Priory of St Andrew, and you're kind of like, where is that? That is Rochester, what we now know as Rochester Cathedral. And Gundulph, I think he designed Rochester Cathedral as well as the original medieval hospital, didn't he? So it was quite interesting that he was obviously a form of a minister and also an architect, and he was kind of really renowned for his stonework from what I'd read. So really interesting person, actually.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and in terms of the original building, the hospital, we all know it as St. Bartholomew's in Rochester, but interestingly enough, it is the original medieval structure was actually, and the chapel adjoining it was actually built on land that's now Chatham. It used to front the high street, and yeah, so it's quite interesting there. And the Corporational Hospital, following on from our point about structure, it was made up of the head and an unknown number of brethren, or as they also knew them as canons. At the time, the land became very valuable quite instantly soon after, because it was on the banks of the River Medway, and obviously that was a huge economic powerhouse for industrial activity in particular. So there were quite a variety of people that actually tried to take possession of the land, and they tried to steal it. Particularly in 1579 was one of the closest attempts to taking possession of it. But a lord named Lord Burleigh, he was able to actually put those attempts to a stop. So later on in 1627, a Lady Bingley, she received a sum of money, and that was for, as Dr. Stratton said, was for either real or imaginary interest in the land. So
yeah, I read that. I was like, real or imaginary. I like that.
Did she or did she not have interest in the land? It seems like a mystery to this very day, but yeah. So after 1627, when she received the sum of money, the revenue of the hospitals were then enjoyed by the deans of Rochester for 217 years up until 1844. And around 1844, soon after, the judges in the Chancery, they actually conducted a trial looking into problems about land ownership over the hospital, and they did, from what I believe from the article, they did find they did vote against the deans of Rochester, from what I'm aware of.
I think they were taking some of the money, weren't they?
Yeah, there was some shady business.
Naughty.
Yeah. So yeah, so the only medieval structure that actually exists to this very day is the chapel, which is on the corner of Gundulph Road, on the corner of that long winding road that goes around the hospital, and the one that fronts the high street, and that's actually on the boundary now, the modern boundary of Chatham and Rochester, and is currently a kickboxing centre. A boxing centre, which is an interesting alternative use, but there we have it. We have some photos actually that we did retrieve, thankfully, from the archive centre in Strood. Share them now. You can see that, right?
You got that working? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, if I tried it my end, I was a bit nervous.
Yes. So this is the chapel that we obviously know today. That was around 1940. Of course, you can see the cars there.
They're definitely not medieval cars, are they? So
no, definitely not medieval cars. But no, you can tell it looks very tidy, very looked after, maintained. Because there was a period of time until the kickboxing centre came along, which was it was in quite a bit of disrepair. But no, thankfully they've done the job, repairing it. But no, that's quite interesting.
I mean, looking after a listed building is a lot of work, isn't it?
Yes, yeah,
It becomes so complicated about what you can and can't do anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also, we've got another one, this view of St. Bartholomew's Chapel. That's Gandalf Road on the side where the people are standing. It's actually quite interesting how in historic photos they always stand, you know, and they just stare at the camera. And
It's
like,
like it's like the Google photos of today.
Yeah, like the Google Street View.
Yeah.
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 And that's a high street between Chatham and Rochester within the Intra area. So that's quite interesting. Its history there, and it's nice to know that we've got that medieval structure still existing to this very day. It's it's only part of what was quite a big hospital at the time, the original one, but it's nice to have that touch of medieval history on that site still. Natasha, I think I'll hand over to you with some more information, particularly on its treatment of leprosy patients.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, the name of why it was called St. Bartholomew, because you kind of think, why didn't, I don't know, Gandalf could have named it after himself, really, couldn't he? But obviously the St. Bart's in London. We've not mentioned that yet, actually, but and actually the one in Rochester came before the one in London, but they were of a similar period of time, which is quite interesting. And there's two reasons why we think, it's not confirmed, why we think that these hospitals were named after St. Bartholomew. The first one is because St. Bartholomew was skinned alive and therefore was exposing, he had exposed wounds, and obviously leprosy is a condition of the skin, and these first hospitals were for leprosy, so therefore for these hospitals to be related to skin conditions and mainly leprosy in the medieval period, it would make sense that they were named after St. Bartholomew, who had been skinned alive. The second reason, which I kind of prefer because I think it's more interesting, is that his body apparently washed up on the island, Tiber Island in Rome. And this island, Tiber Island, was the location of an ancient temple of Esculapius, who was the Greek god of medicine and healing. And then, so because then they call the body parts relics, that these parts of his body landed on this island, he then became related to health throughout the world in some way. But it wasn't clearly distinguished. It's obviously just one of those things that probably at some point everybody knew, of course that's why it's called St. Bartholomew's, and then it's kind of been lost. But the fact that the relics, that parts of his body are kind of distributed throughout the world, show that they obviously were seen as being very sacred, and the fact that they washed up onto this island that was connected to the god of health, I think, it could be a bit of both, couldn't it? It could be a bit of both. But yeah, the care of lepers during this time, a lot of it was based around, clean clothes, having a roof over your head, having somewhere to sleep, and being fed really well, which is something that as the week goes on, we're going to discuss further, actually, that the real value of being fed very well. And it's really interesting, and we've got a lot of information from Historic England, so kind of thank you a second time there. My camera dropped out for a moment. That these hospitals were essentially the first type of care for the sick, and there was a network of these types of hospitals throughout the country, and also the almshouses, which were also kind of quite familiar with in Medway, were also created, and they did form a kind of connection for different forms of care. But Bartholomew's was really only for leprosy, so they wouldn't even let people in that had mental health conditions. It was purely for leprosy, which is quite interesting, really, because you think about how wards are set up today, there is a divide. But yeah, so that was quite interesting. And leprosy was only considered as not being a public health problem in the year 2000. So because there are still forms of leprosy throughout the world, but for them to say it's no longer a problem, it means that there is less than one case per 10,000 people. So yeah, it's curable with a drug, but obviously there were no drugs in the medieval period, so it was just about care and trying to also, I imagine they didn't really understand things being contagious then, but or why it was contagious, but actually trying to also keep people separated, which was known when you look in the Bible, that people with leprosy were obviously outcast, weren't they, from the community, and had bells on them so that you knew that they were coming. And they do think that the leprosy of the biblical times and of the medieval times was quite different, but still it would have come with a lot of fear, basically, from people. There is a missing arm, if you want me to talk about the
missing arm. Yes, that was actually quite a funny story, so I think the people love that. Go ahead.
So, as I was saying, the relics of St. Bartholomew were considered very sacred, which obviously happens with a lot of different saints.
Yeah.
And, parts of his body are in different places, and his arm was actually given to Canterbury Cathedral in the 11th century. It says that his arm was gifted to the church, as you do, a nice gift, but basically it's not there anymore. We don't know where the arm is, and when it basically in the 1800s, it just was no longer there. And recently St. Paul's Cathedral tweeted the Canterbury Cathedral, and they were arguing about like how come like Beckett's body's here and all these different body parts everywhere, but and they were like, we hear that you have the arm but nobody knows where it is, and they were like, yeah, we'll have to check on that. So there was still no response.
No one's got no idea.
His arm is missing.
Yeah.
I just thought it's so interesting that was so local, and obviously our connection between Rochester and Canterbury goes back a long way. So yeah, so there we go. Missing arm. It didn't say, it was annoying as well, because I just was like, is it his left arm or his right arm? I know it doesn't matter, but I was just like, bet that's recorded somewhere. Here we go. So yeah, we want to hear your stories, not from medieval times. That would be a long stretch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, so if you've stayed, worked, or lived in the hospital, as we said, or know someone who has, it could be a family member, a friend, or just someone that you know, we'd love to hear your stories and memories and experiences of the hospital. And if you've got photos, old photos, and maybe even videos, who knows, but particularly photos, we'd absolutely love to see them. And there are 3 ways that you could actually send them over to us. So you could do that by post. So if you, on your envelope, you could just write on it St. Bart's Project, and that will be directed towards Intra at 3372341 High Street in Rochester. The postcode is ME11DA. You can also do it by our email. We've got dedicated, it's like a dedicated hotline email for the project, for St. Bart's Project at gmail.com. And you could also do it through social media on Twitter and Facebook. You could find myself at Future Chatham, but you could also do it through the Creatabot page, through Natasha. So yeah, there are many ways to get involved, for sure.
That's it, yeah. And if you know of people, we wanted to provide the postal address because you might know of people that are not on email, not on Facebook, but they do have an account. So please do encourage them to write to us, and I will make sure I will write back. So I will write back to people. So yeah, we really love to hear people's stories, and we're looking forward to sharing those stories as the week goes on.
Absolutely. So with the days ahead, we've got quite a packed schedule, haven't we? Covering quite a bit of content. So obviously it's finishing on Sunday. On the Saturday, that's the last sort of, I guess, information sort of learning day, and that will be covering the future of it. But up until Saturday, when we look at the future of the hospital, tomorrow you're doing an activity, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm going to look at food and life during the medieval times. So I'm hopefully going to do a kind of a cooking session if I can find if it's edible enough. I don't.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I'm going to talk about food in the medieval times and life in the medieval times, just to try and imagine what life would have been like in that area. I mean, obviously there wouldn't have been as many buildings for a start, and like you were saying, the Medway came up a lot closer, didn't it, to that edge. Would have been interesting to see how close to the river it would have been actually in the medieval period.
Yeah.
But it was a lot greener, we know that much.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So tomorrow we're looking at just life being a Bart's patient, ultimately, what the treatments are like. And of course, Natasha will be doing an activity there. So definitely tune in. That will be really good. On Wednesday, we're going to a very spooky dimension of St. Bart's. And obviously, loads of people know about all those ghost stories. So we'll be covering that and also looking at the hospital in the Lock Hospital era. So that should be quite interesting, I think. Yeah, we've definitely got a lot.
We said dark St. Bart's.
Dark St. Bart's,
dark
yeah.
St. Bart's, yeah.
I think that's a theme that definitely there's so many stories at the moment, particularly online. So it'll be really, really, really interesting to look into that. And who knows? I mean, hopefully the future residents of St. Bart's don't watch the video on Wednesday and go, oh God, why did I buy this stuff?
Yeah, we're not trying to put, that's the interesting thing is as much as there's these accounts of ghosts, I haven't heard a bad thing about working there at all yet. Everyone has said that they loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, very positive. So I think that's the thing, it had that real community, like sort of family feel there among the workforce.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, the days we'll be looking at how that changed as well in terms of the culture there and so on. So yes, on Wednesday we're looking at Dark St. Bart's. On Thursday we're getting creative with St. Bart's. So Natasha will be leading our call out for creative responses. And I think you'll also be doing another activity, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to look at the kind of what things would then inspire us in terms of architectural imagery of it. Yeah. And also it's a good opportunity for us to mention as well that Ali Sinyard has got a poetry trail that she's creating as part of the Heritage Action Zone project, and so next week she'll be collecting poems, and we're kind of hoping that there might be one relating to St. Bart's as part of that trail. So if anything comes to mind through the stories that we tell and the posts that we're going to put out, of course, then that would, please do keep in mind if a poem springs up, and we'll be resharing what people create. I'm definitely going to do some sketching as well, and I think it just plays into it that it's so inspiring, the stories, that you might even have ones which you want to make of your own.
Yeah, definitely. And then on Friday, the last working day of the week, we'll be looking at behind the walls of St. Bart's. So looking at the healthcare departments in the hospital wards within it as well. And we'll also be looking at the artwork on the walls, tag art in the hospitals, as well as all the vegetation, because it is, especially more recently, it's become really covered in vegetation, hasn't it?
From the point of view of there were plants growing in, and now they're growing on the outside.
It's become like a little mini urban jungle at the moment. But no, so we'll be looking at that on Friday, and we've also got a film to show, haven't we?
Yes, I guess we could either stream it live or give it to people to watch. It's because it's quite long, isn't it? So you might have to say to people, go and watch it, please.
Yeah, but it should be really interesting. I think we've got a really packed week ahead looking at St. Bart's. So it should be really interesting. And then on Sunday we'll be looking back on it, reflecting on what we found, and most of all, hopefully we'll have a lot of responses. We've received quite a few responses.
I've got to go back and look at all the comments, and
it's been really encouraging. So that's really the week ahead. Natasha, is there anything else to add, I think, for today, or?
No, I think that's covered it really.
Sums it up nicely.
Yeah, very nice.
In that case, I'd say thank you to everyone for tuning in.
And
definitely wherever possible, tune in over the next few days. We'll be live at various times. I don't know, it might not be 12 every day roughly, but during the day for sure. And most of all, you can look back, you can watch back on it. if you just go to our pages, Future Chatham on Facebook or Creatabot. So you can watch it back there. And we'll be making these recordings available as well quite soon after.
Yeah.
Through YouTube and also through our website. So it's all going to be accessible pretty much. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah.
Day.
Have a great day.
Bye.